Welcome to Django Advanced Training. In this video we're going to take a look at how class-based views are implemented in Django. All class-based views in Django extend from the parent class view. The implementation for that code can be found in Django Views Generic Base. And here we can see the parent class for all class-based views. We're going to look at a few methods in this class to see how class-based views are implemented in Django. First, we can see this attribute that's assigned, giving all the HTTP method names that a class-based view can support out of the box, and that we'll see that later in this implementation too. Next, we're going to look at the dunder_init method. This is actually fairly straightforward. It takes a number of keyword arguments, anything that's passed into it, and just sets those attributes on the instance. Next, we'll look at the dispatch function. The dispatch method takes the request and a number of keyword arguments and returns the results of whatever handler is. Handler is decided by this conditional here, where we're saying whatever the HTTP method is that this request has is for. So if it's a get, that'll be all lowercase get. If it's a post, all lowercase post, and so forth. And as long as that method name is in that list that we saw, then we're going to attempt to get the attribute or method on the instance, on this class-based view instance, of that name. So once again, if we had a get request coming in, this is lowercase get, and that's in that list, so then we're going to say, give me the get method of this class-based view. And you notice here, the view parent class does not have a get method anywhere. So maybe a better example here right now would be options. Options is an HTTP method. So if a request came in that used the options method here, then we would be retrieving the options method here. So this would be returned back into handler. If whatever the method is not there, we're going to default to this other function, this other method, HTTP method not allowed. Also, if our HTTP method is not in the HTTP method names, then we're also going to use this HTTP method not allowed method. So once we get our handler, then we're just going to call that and return the result of that. So you can see for options, we're going to pass in the request, args, and kwargs. And this is going to generate a new HTTP response, set some headers, and return that. So this should look like a function-based view, pretty similar to a function-based view. Probably the only addition really is this reference to self. The final method we're going to look at in the parent class, the view parent class, is the asView method. Now here's where class-based views actually work. This is why they work inside Django. This asView method will take any number of init kwargs, and it's going to do some validation on them here. And then we're just implementing, generating essentially a dynamic function. So this function, inside this method, we're creating this new function, and then we're returning it. So if you remember using function-based views in Django, in your URL config, you're going to see the regular expression for the path for your URL, and then you're going to see a reference to the function to be executed for that view, the view function. With class-based views, you see the class name, and then this asView method is called. So really what's happening there is we're returning a new function that represents our class-based view. And this function is actually fairly simple as well. We're instantiating a new instance of our class-based view. We're adding a few attributes, validation and attributes to our class-based view. So for example, if we have a get method defined and we don't have a head method defined, we're going to make sure that head is equal to get. Also, we're going to add our request and our args and our quarks to our class-based view instance, and then we're going to call the dispatch function, which we saw just returns an HTTP response based on the method the HTTP method that's been requested. So we generate that function and we return it. So once again, thinking about the URL configs, Django didn't have to change any of the internals in Django to support class-based views when they thought of them. Django supported function-based views, and class-based views are simply a good way to organize and have code reuse among your views a little bit better potentially. And as far as the internals are concerned, it's just a function. It's still just a function-based view when it comes down to it. So a new request comes in and this method gets called and we instantiate a new instance of our class-based view and return the result of calling its dispatch function. We're now going to look at a couple of the mix-ins provided in this file as well in order to see how, once again, code reuse and class-based views can be used to make some class-based views simple and take advantage of code reuse and potentially be a little bit better organized. So here's one simple class, the context mix-in. Any class-based view that extends from this just gets a new attribute defined and a new method defined. So the getContextData method can be called in any of our class-based views that extend it, and it'll take any keyword arguments given to it. It's going to make sure that there's a view key in that keyword arguments, and if it's not, it makes sure that it's self. And then it's going to also make sure that if extra context is defined on your class, that also gets updated inside Quarks, and then that gets sent back. So getContextData essentially will then take a dictionary of context variables and make sure that view and whatever else is inside extra context gets added to that, kind of filling it out. The next mix-in we'll look at here is below the view class. We have template response mix-in. So this mix-in provides two methods here, render to response and get template names. Both of them are fairly simple. Get template names does a quick configuration check, but really just returns whatever the value of template name is inside a list. And render to response then uses that in order to get this argument when we're instantiating the response class. So you can see here we'll have a template response class as our default response class, and when render to response is called, given the context, we're going to instantiate an instance of whatever the response class is, give it the request, the template names, the context, once again passed in here, and return that instance of a response. Now we can see the benefits here in this simple but useful class-based view, the template view. The template view has three parent classes. The template response mixin, which provided the two methods and a couple attributes there of render to response and get template names. the context mixin, which provided the getContextData method, and then the parent class of view, which once again provided all of the class-based view functionality. So with that, we can define in our template view the get method. So because we extended view, this is saying that any HTTP request that comes to a template view will execute this if it's an HTTP get method request. And then this is fairly straightforward once again, but we're reusing some of this code from the mixins. So we're going to get our context data and store that in context, and then we're just calling render to response. We're going to instantiate one of those response classes and give it the context. That's going to render a template and return it. I hope this has been helpful, and thanks for listening.